I just think the focus right now in the culture is very, very top heavy with, I call this the gender identity industry, because it's identity medicine. That's what it is, right? So it's an industry that's forming around identity. And I think that most of the culture is in a swirl around the gender and the identity part of that equation. And what's lacking really in a big, big way is the industry part of that. I think that capitalism basically subsumes anything that we try to do in terms of grassroots movements at this point in time, because technology is so incredible and people are so attached to the internet and so involved in their computers that they have the advantage, not to mention money. But during the AIDS crisis, a lot of gays came out and the medical industrial complex became involved in this community, small community, because of men were getting sick, gay men were getting sick in the population, right? So the medical industrial complex comes right into this grassroots movement before it's even like really fully formed, right? And starts sort of functioning alongside of them. Now, when AIDS starts to get under control in the United States, suddenly these LGB, which were then LGB NGOs, non-governmental organizations here in the United States. Tim Gill left his software corporation. He's a billionaire philanthropist, also, was involved in computer softwares and technology. He left his company to start, one of the largest LGBT NGOs, what has become LGBT NGOs in the United States. And John Stryker, who was in the banking industry, also heir to a multi-million-dollar medical corporation, leaves his banking career and comes and starts Arcus Foundation, which is globally driving the gender identity industry. And he forms this LGBT NGO, Arcus Foundation, which he funds through his medical corporation stock. And these two, build up a very, very powerful network, LGB and, T NGOs. The T is added, TQI was added around, I think, 2005. All the LGB NGOs started to add the T, the I, and the Q to the umbrella. Now, what we're looking at here, what I see, what I perceive, they've added this, the T, Q, and I, to extend identity medicine. AIDS is not paying off anymore. The medical industrial complex is already involved in these corporate identities, what they've formed, LGB, as corporate identities. It's just same-sex attraction. LGB, that banner, is really a corporate entity now. But you can't really get more identities out of a sexually dimorphic species. You've got the L, the G, and the B, and you've got heterosexuals. What are you going to do now if you want to expand your market? Because LGB entered the marketplace and it became a juggernaut. I mean, in 2015, it was worth 9.9 something billion dollars, the LGB market. Now it's worth $3.6 trillion in 5 years. I mean, that's wild. So in order to do this, in order to add these other identities, you have to have disembodiment, right? And they're deconstructing sex within the law. They're replacing sex in the law with gender identity. You can change your birth certificates, you can change your official documents, you can change your, driver's license. MasterCard came out with a credit card. You can change your name on your credit card. Whatever, it's sex that they're after. It's not gender per se. I mean, every generation before us really has had a movement of young people, rebelling against strict gender stereotypes. And they never needed medication before to do this. They wore each other's clothing, the hippies had the long hair and the flowered shirts. And, so every generation has done this, every generation of youth. But now, enter the medical industrial complex. Now you have to change your body to express whatever stereotypes you're particularly invested in.
In your writing, you talk about the shift from exploiting women's bodies to colonizing women's bodies. Can you talk a little bit about that in relation to autogynephilia?
Yes. Okay, so exploiting women's sex for labor under capitalism, free labor, that's exploitation. Prostitution, pornography, that's exploitation. Exploiting women's biology for sexual gratification of men and for profit. The transgender identity, the gender identity industry really goes one further in that they're trying to break the boundary between male and female. Okay, so once you do that, now your sex, as in your genetic code and your DNA, is actually up for grabs. It's not just sexual expression or your sex as in terms of, what makes you male and female, not just your genitalia.
Yeah, and I appreciate also the distinction that you make between plastic surgery and denying biological sex, right? You make the distinction that plastic surgery doesn't attack what makes us fundamentally human, whereas transgenderism does exactly that. The purpose, as you put it, is to dilute the truth that we are a dimorphic species, to erase that truth, and to make it so that people are not rooted in their sexed bodies. You talk about dismembering as well, which makes so much sense and is so strange. The kind of the world that I was really in was female health and all of these mantras like be yourself and love your body, and then at the same time the very liberal birth world that I was entrenched in was also saying, oh no, but affirm everyone who hates their body too. Right? It was just it's so strange, and now I can only
it's so weird.
It's so weird.
Such a disconnect. This is the real nut here. This is the real core of this issue is autogynephilia. It's a paraphilia of adult men, and definitely being underplayed in this issue. The man who is really the behind the apparatus here, his ideology. Well, his name is Martin Rothblatt. And he considers himself a transsexual and a transhumanist. He's trained in law. He's been the owner of a massive biopharmaceutical corporation. He's involved in technology. He invented Sirius Radio. He has been involved in the Human Genome Project. He has a farm for xenotransplantation, animal organs transplanted into humans, 3D printing of organs, company. There's so many things that this guy has done, but he's also trained as a lawyer. And in the 90s, he drafted the first legal document, along with several other autogynephilic men, lawyers, the first legal document to take gender identity, disembodiment into the law, to give it legal structure. He did this, and that became the International Bill of Gender Rights later on, right? And this is morphed across the globe into the SOGI 123 and the different bills that they're trying to pass to bring gender identity in and take sex out. And from that point on, he's sort of worked very quietly behind the scenes. He's there, but unless you're really looking for him, you're probably not going to find him, right? I look for him because I know he's behind this. I ran into one of the books that he wrote was From Transgender to Transhuman, right? And he sees transgenderism as an on-ramp to transhumanism, which is really disembodiment, full disembodiment. There's dissociation, disengagement with your body, and then there's full on, you don't have a body. And this is where this guy is going, right? Now, he happens to be really, really brilliant. He's also a maniac. He's totally biophobic, invested in taking technology wherever it will go, no ethics considered, no morals considered. He has co-opted feminism to use for his own purposes. And you could read this in the book, From Transgender to Transhuman. He also is involved in the technological future of birth, reproduction, gene splicing or genes unzipped, which is about your genetic coding. And all this is happening along the same time. Here he is, and he's involved in the Human Genome Project, and up and coming is the CRISPR technology that's developing, right? That's like really changing your genetic code, your DNA. I mean, they have the ability to do this now, and they're perfecting it, and they're getting really far along in terms of this, right? So there's Martine Rothblatt at the very, very seat of this movement, and he's got this paraphilia. Now, a paraphilia, the paraphilia of autogynephilia is a fetish, is not, you're obsessed and compulsively sexually attracted to an object, right? And it often escalates through your life. And autogynephilia, in this paraphilia specifically, the object is female biology. So here's Martine Rothblatt. He has this paraphilia with women as the object, their biology. And he has all this power and he has all this money, and you can see how this evolves from like cross-dressing for sexual gratification to actually invading women's biology, like the interior of their biology, taking technology to the point where you have colonized reproduction with tech, right? And then you have another autogynephile, Jennifer Pritzker, who was in the Army, in the armed forces. I wrote a whole article in the Federalist, and I had to publish on the right. I'm not of the right at all. I've always been left all my life, but I've had to publish on the right because the left won't publish any of this, my research. So I published in the Federalist a whole article about the Pritzker family. They're a billionaire family in America. They're worth like $29 billion. And they're massively, massively invested in the medical industrial complex at so many levels, I couldn't even describe it, but I do mention most of them in the article. And it's the whole family, but Jennifer Pritzker himself, who decided in his 60s, after being married and having children, that he was actually a woman. So here's this man who's very, very rich, and of course he hangs out with all these other really, really rich people, who sort of engineer society to their liking. He's involved with other philanthropists. And he decides he's a woman. So one day he shows up in dress and pearls, as if this is what makes a person a woman. I mean, it's just so insane. And then he starts funding the hell out of this issue. He starts culturally driving the gender identity agenda through our cultural institutions, our medical institutions. And so
everything you've just said is incredibly powerful and incredibly clarifying. There's the women that I've talked to who are questioning this, even who are like kind of in it, try to stay away from talking about autogynephilia. Like it's a very unpopular, it's like one of the most unpopular sets of things to discuss amongst the kind of transgender dialogue.
Normalization of a fetish, taking that into the culture is really, really harmful, especially when it's objectifying somebody else. We don't take pedophilia into the culture and say, oh, these people are normal. This is normal to have this attraction. As long as they don't act on it, they're not really hurting anybody. Well, that's a lot of crap because, if I know you're a pedophile, but you're not acting on that, I know you're a pedophile because you're telling me that. And if you're telling me that for a reason, which is that you need validation for that, which really makes me a participant in your sexual proclivities, right? Now, with this fetish, which is being normalized in the culture, not just through, everything that I just spoke about, but, within corporate culture, this is being normalized. I just wrote a blog post about Goldman Sachs, how they're having these training meetings in their corporations for people to embrace transsexualism. Embrace men, basically men, that are coming in that are dressing it like, women, dressing like women, you know what I mean? Culturally accepted women's garb, they're actually cultivating this environment for these men to do this. They're having meetings saying, hey, if you're transsexual, transgender is really just a rebranding. It's a corporate rebranding, to make transgenderism cool for people, because, it's really hard to sell a fetish. It's the same thing. It's the same thing. It's a disembodiment, an objectification. And we are normalizing this. And this is like the real danger here, because we're just taking this right into, it's right in the market now. Everybody's selling it. Everybody's buying it. They're selling it to school children. You can be boys or girls. They're telling you in your classrooms now, and their sexual education curriculums are being changed. This is why nobody can speak about, womanhood and women's biology, because it's all being changed. Now, in the corporate level, they're telling people, you have to use specific pronouns, or guess what? We're not telling you this yet, but you're going to be out of a job, just like journalists are out of a job, professors are being out of a job, doulas are being put out of a job. This is really getting terrifying. I mean, I'm terrified on the daily. That's why I write, because I would be consumed with terror if I didn't actually resist what I'm seeing. So that's why I pump out as much information as I possibly can. I'm terrified. People call me brave, heroic. Oh, you're doing this, you're doing that. No, I'm terrified. I'm absolutely blind terror every single day. Yeah, introducing this into the cultural, into the corporate culture is really, really frightening. It's really, really frightening to me, because you're appropriating female biology, and this is okay. Not only that, but you're telling people that, this is their sexual proclivity. Why don't you keep it in your bedroom? Why are you letting it out into the culture and saying objectification and disembodiment, cool, normal, it's an identity, it's completely fine. Well, this demands that other people are involved in your sex life, basically, right? Because you need this validation, right, for your paraphilia. You need this social validation. So I'm set up now as your validation for your, paraphilia. This is not normal. This is not healthy. It's not good. It's not normal. Disembodiment is not normal. Disassociation is not normal. Sexually objectifying other people is not normal. And children are being exposed to this as well.
How do you then kind of think about what's happening to young women, right? So if you're talking right now about particularly adult men who are colonizing female biology, objectifying women as a sexual fetish. Do you think that women are just collateral damage and they're just reacting to sexist stereotypes, which is why then they are seeking out medical transition? Or do you think it's just a kind of ripple effect of what the transhumanists are doing? Of dissociation, disembodiment, and...
Well, I think that young women are particularly vulnerable to their images, as they're growing up and going through puberty, because of the culture that they live in, which is hyper sexualized and already sexually objectifies females all over the place. I mean, I walk down the street in New York City and I go past Victoria's Secret and there's a woman in her underwear, in her lingerie. Normal. If I go to the deli, what's in the magazines, on the cover of the magazines is 1950s porn, completely normalized, right? So what's taken the place of those pictures that are now being normalized in the culture are violent porn that degrades and humiliates women, which is available to young boys, at the flip of a button on their cell phones. Right? And this is impacting young women's lives, girls' lives, in high school and in middle school, because boys are acting on this. This is their sexual education. And there's like billboards of like, completely naked women in Times Square, 50-foot billboards, with their legs closed, of course. But, it's the sexual objectification of women is already completely normal and saturated in the culture. So women, wow, this is a lot for a young woman to take in when her body, starts to change, and women, young women act this out on their bodies. you know, with cutting, with dieting, with anorexia, you know, with all these body issues, right? You know, here comes an agenda that tells you, or a movement, you know, it's a human right for you to just lob off your breasts and identify as a man, as a male. I mean, this is crazy. This is way crazy, you know, and I'm not afraid to say so. It's insanity. And anybody that's letting this happen on their watch is equally as insane and lost. 35,000 young women on GoFundMe seeking money to have their healthy breasts taken off, amputated. And doctors are doing so willingly. You know, this hasn't been, you know, saturated in the culture for more than like, you know, 10 years, right? It's probably less. And now we have non-binary surgeries. A couple of doctors in California now that are doing non-binary surgeries where they'll invert a man's scrotum into a cavity that they've drilled into his body so that he can have what is, you know, a hole for penetration. I don't know. Mm-hmm. While leaving his penis intact. This is now called non-binary surgery. This is macabre. This is, you know, this is crazy that we've gotten to this point. It's like we're really in a death spiral. I think, you know, transgenderism is like emblematic of us, you know, just being in a death spiral because there's really nothing else for, you know, the corporatists to colonize. They've already eaten like most of the globe. You know, we don't have any clean water. We don't have any clean air. What's left?
Children.
We killed off many of the species.
Children's
you know,
bodies.
The rest of them are living what we're living with, you know, bad water, bad air, you know, bad food, full of chemicals. You know, where do you go? You know, there's nothing left to colonize except us. Literally us. And what we are is a sexually dimorphic species. So you got to get in there into our genetic coding and, you know, yeah, woo.
It's crazy. You know, I have a question for you about hypno-sissy porn. I recently spoke to a woman whose husband got addicted to this hypno-sissy porn and then became physically abusive and did transition and lives his life thinking he's a woman. It hadn't occurred to me that straight men are being targeted with this ideology through hypnotic porn. I mean, I had no idea this was a thing. And so, you know, I think I'm mostly, you know, in my days talking about the impact this is having on women and girls and the erosion of our sex-based rights and things like that. But, you know, who is pulling the strings with the hypno-sissy porn? Like who is, you know, because my understanding of hypno-sissy porn is that it starts off relatively normal meaning like standard, degrading, disgusting porn. And so a man watching it doesn't always seek it out knowing what it is. And so trans rights activists will say, oh no, it's just him finding himself, herself, and you know, it's just aligned with who she truly is. But there have been a number of men who have contacted me since I released that interview with the ex-wife of this man, saying that they got into it not knowing what it was about, had never considered the idea that they might be trapped in the wrong bodies, and how this porn has destroyed their lives.
I do know that, you know, everything that we know about pornography is that people develop a saturation point with it, so that they need more and more stimulation, you know, and the pornography companies are really just, they're hurting, man. They're hurting for more, you know, more horrible things that they can do to women, you know, basically, and children. I mean, so it's just, you know, it's just constant, it's a constant amping up. So men are just, you know, exposed to more and more aberrant things, you know, through pornography industry. I mean, it's whopping. That industry is just whopping big. And also, it's not just in pornography that it's being cultivated, that it's normal. I mean, on a recent Sports Illustrated cover, you know, which is, you know, typical like heterosexist, or yeah, heterosexist basically magazine, you know, with barely clad women. on the cover. Well, they recently had a man who, I guess he thinks he's a woman, or he's pretending to be a woman. But, you know, he had all the, you know, the long hair and the makeup and the, you know, the little bikini, you know, the fake breasts. And, you know, this is being advertised to men. You have Bruce Jenner, who's a major, massive sports star, you know, on the cover of Vanity Fair in his little, you know, what do you call those things? Bodice or I don't even fucking know.
Like the yeah, a bodice or a corset or
corset. I think it's a corset.
oh
Maybe.
gosh, yeah, the red shiny one. How could I forget?
You know, so it's being normalized right out in mainstream media. You got this guy, what's that show? Transparent.
Oh,
you know, where the,
yes.
you know, middle-aged, comes out to his family and all the gyrations that the families go on around this, you know, all the reactions that they have to it. And this is like a major series on mainstream TV. Oh, geez, where did they get it from? It's right in their face. It's all in their face. And so is everything that I'm saying about this industry is all right there. It's just that people aren't looking for it. Do you know what I'm saying? They're looking at what they're being told and they're not doing any critical thinking because it's just sort of because people are busy, they're tired, they're not activists, they don't care, they've got other things to care about, they've got children, they've got 2 jobs. You know, I mean, this is just some little fad that the kids are going through or that's, you know, but it's getting really intense now and people are starting to notice. So this is really good. I mean, when Goldman Sachs is selling you a human rights movement, honey, if you believe this, I mean, I got a bridge I want to sell you. You know? I mean, all the corporations are massively invested in this. Corporations don't massively invest in real human rights movements. You know, human rights movements come up against those entities, right? It's just, it boggles my mind that people just don't ask any critical questions at all.
At what point in your research did you realize how big this was? Like, when did it first start coming up for you in your life? When did you start hearing whispers of it? How did this really kind of like all come together for you?
You know, Janice Raymond, a radical feminist, wrote The Transsexual Empire in the 70s. I didn't get to it until the 80s. When, you know, early 80s when I started to become very aware of feminism. So I wasn't completely oblivious to this idea. I was involved with an environmental organization, Deep Green Resistance. And one of the founders asked me, because I was living in New York City, you know, hey, you know, would you try and find us some platforms to speak, some venues? Because we're getting deplatformed everywhere. They were one of the first, you know, real human rights and environmental rights movements to be completely blacklisted over this issue because they acknowledged biological reality. They actually had some trans individuals or people identifying as trans within the organization and men, and they wanted to be included in the women's caucus. And the women were like, no, we'll help you build your own caucus if you'd like, but you can't be part of ours because you're men. And so they left the organization and they went along, and everywhere they tried to speak about the environment, they were blacklisted. These people would show up, you know, young people, basically, with blue hair and bones in their nose, you know, screaming, you know, trans women are women, and defacing their materials at their, you know, events, and screaming through the whole thing so that nobody could hear anything that they had to say. And so I thought, you know, here I am in New York City. This is a big city. There's a lot, you know, there's a lot of difference, you know, coming up against each other in this city. You know, we'll be able to handle this, you know. So in fact, I secured like 3 different venues and they were all canceled within days. And by the 3rd one, I was like, oh shit, this is something really, this is something going on here. You know, this is not like, you know, blue-haired kids with bones in their nose, like, you know, making this happen. This is not them. I didn't know exactly what was going on. I was really angry that this was happening. And I was also like, you know, I wanted to know, like, why is it happening? Why is anybody that has this much power, there's money behind it. So let me just look and see what's going on. So I started to look around, poke around. Where's the money coming from? Where's it going? You know? And a lot of names started coming up. immediately. John Stryker, Tim Gill, the Pritzkers, and their involvement in this, Rothblatt, Soros, George Soros, Drummond Pike, who operates the Tides Foundation, which is basically a tax haven for very, very wealthy people, and also makes their donations anonymous. They can donate to an organization that you don't know who they donated to because it goes through the Tides Foundation. There's Mark Bonham, another billionaire banker up in Canada, who's started this sexuality diversity organization, who sends around his little minions to say that sex isn't real. There was one of them, I forget her name now, she's actually thinks she's a man, and that sexual dimorphism doesn't exist. And she wound up in an interview with Jordan Peterson. Yeah, so I started seeing like a lot of the same names, and then I just kept going, with the research. Just going back and back and back, and who's funding what, and why are they funding this, and when the transgender stuff started coming in. At the same time, I got involved in social media. I wasn't really a big social media person. This was back in 2013. So I started to get involved in social media, and I started to share some of the information around, and I wrote this article that's like really peels the onion on this. It uses the Pritzker family, but I also talk about how they're emblematic of what's happening across different people, and organizations. It's not just them. These billionaires are funding our cultural and medical and educational institutions to bring gender identity in, right? Arcus has specifically said that. John Stryker of Arcus Foundation has come straight out and said that basically if you don't adhere to gender identity ideology, you get no money, And basically, there's a lot of threat involved in this. There's a lot of authoritarianism involved in this. North Carolina is a good example of what's happening to anybody who won't get on board with the gender identity industry's narrative. And Arcus Foundation has made it very clear, if you don't get on board with us, and they fund millions of dollars to all sorts of cultural organizations and institutions. If you don't get on board with this ideology, you're going to be left, in the dust. And North Carolina is a prime example of that. 50 corporations, very top heavy with tech corporations, got on board and signed an amicus brief that basically said, in a nice way, in a nice professional business kind of way, that if you don't get on board with this, we are going to ruin you. We're going to pull our money out of your state, which was like trillions of dollars of money. We're going to pull that out of your state and you're going to be financially irrelevant. And Obama threatened to pull federal money out of the schools if they didn't get on board with the gender neutral bathrooms, which was basically illegal, but he did it anyway. But they stand as an example to what these corporations will do to you if you don't get on board with this ideology of disembodiment.
Can you speak to how it's affected your professional life and social circles? Have you kind of always been around women and men of a similar viewpoint? Or, you mentioned that the right publishers and publications of the right are the only ones who will publish your work these days, and how strange that is, for you having always, been a part of the left. Can you speak to that?
I have my own business, which is one of the reasons I do what I do, write about this. I'm just very, very forthcoming about what I find, is because they can't really touch me because I have my own business. I'm not involved with academia at all. I'm an autodidact, so I have no relationship to universities or institutions or any of that. I haven't gotten much pushback. I mean, I probably get pushback on the articles that I write and that I put out there on different platforms beyond my own, but I never pay any attention to that. I just put out the information. I don't really get involved in a whole lot of arguments anymore either. Initially I did, to try and make points, but I really find this is like a corporate cult, and I mean that very, very literally. And the market and the technology that drives this information is really the cult leader. Since like 2014, when Laverne Cox was on the cover of Time magazine, it's been nonstop 24/7 propaganda about this issue, bringing in little kids and their stories, very Hallmark card narrative kind of stories about families, overcoming this, thing within their families and the poor children. The propaganda has been relentless. I didn't really get like a lot of pushback because they have no way to touch me really, really don't have any close family near me. I didn't have a job out in the world. I had my own business. So they really, they can't really touch me. What can they do besides censor me? And that's pretty much why I developed my own platform, because, they're censoring everybody. And also because I didn't want to continue to publish just on the right. Uncommon Ground Media is it's a new media platform that's left. And they've published several of my articles and have been very, very good about covering this issue. They're great news media. I'm very, very well positioned. I'm not married. I don't have any children. I have my own business. So I'm really, really well positioned to get information out there. So, and I realized that very, very quickly on because, it's been censorious from the beginning. Like I said, a lot of people can't do what I do because they have families, because they have children. I know somebody in the UK that had to move her whole family because of the things that they do. They go after you, they dox you, they go after your livelihood, they contact you on the phone. This issue is too important for people to be silent. It's too important. And we're all under the gun. This is massive, massive corporatism. They're also framing things in a way, they're reversing what's actually true, not just that men can be women, which is obviously insane. But they're calling this, like within corporate speak, is diversity and inclusion. This is about, diversifying our employee pool and including everybody, right? But like, for instance, men are taking spots for women, spots that are to give women a leg up in society so that they're out there, in the culture, helping form it, but they're actually men. It's not really about diversity and inclusion. It's about being homogeneous. You have to have these thoughts. You have to be able to speak like this. You can't go out of the lines, and this is being institutionalized. This is all corporatism, expanding markets, colonizing.
I find that there's such a resistance about agency. Like when I suggest that we as women are making very few choices in the world, or that these children are not free agents over their decisions to kind of take puberty blockers. Like there's a lot of pushback around the idea that we are being groomed and used as pawns and products in this whole corporatism. I wonder how much of this is ego on the part of the parents who are affirming all of this, or the friend who has a trans friend who wouldn't dare question their motives. What is your response to that?
I think there's many, many more parents that have nowhere to go and are finding other outlets of support. Because this is, the whole institutions and the medical institution and the media and everybody has been, controlled by this constant propaganda. I think that, parents have no place to go. So they start to create their own support groups. Some of them have, more success than others. But if you take your child to a psychiatrist because suddenly they decide they have this alter personality and involves taking cross-sex hormones and, they want to have surgery and stuff, and you take them to a psychiatrist and the psychiatrist thinks you're the one with the problem, and the school thinks you're the one with the problem, and your general practitioner says, yeah, here are the puberty blockers, give them to your new alternately sexed child. Whoa, that's a lot of crazy pressure. And like, what do you do, right? And everywhere you turn, this information is all like, you're the crazy one. So parents have been like really gaslit, my heart goes out to them. My heart absolutely breaks for them. It's horrible, obviously, that the children are getting caught up in this and they're the ones that are having their bodies, mutilated, really, for this. But the parents, I mean, can you imagine just watching your child go through this? And I mean, there are children out there, young kids, 15, 16-year-old girls that have gone and had their breasts removed, without their parents' permission, or started cross-sex hormones without their parents' permission, or are now developing facial hair and their voices are changing and they're going to be sterile. And, those things can't be changed around when they get a clue.
Right.
It's horrible. It's horrible.
Do you think this is a depopulation attempt?
I hate to really speculate about things that I can't see. I talk about basically what I can see with my research, what's apparent to me. Because already it's so overwhelming for people to hear what I have to say, what I can see, what I document, the links that I provide, the proof that I provide. It's already like, whoa. It's destabilizing because it's like an alter reality that's actually happening.
Yeah.
But it makes them feel very destabilized. It makes me feel destabilized. The more information I can still be destabilized, on a bad day. This is huge. This is mammoth. The infrastructure for this thing is mammoth to drive body dissociation. It is mammoth. There is so much money in it. There is so much political infrastructure behind this. It's ghastly. It's terrifying. So yeah, to bring even more of that in and to say, oh, it's related to this and related to that. If I can't see it, I don't go there,
Thank you for speaking to that. Yeah. I haven't found a way to package this up and make it nice for anyone. I get asked all the time, what are your one-liners, or what's a paragraph that I can send to a friend who's coming at me with all these trans rights activist talking points. And I definitely think there is a space for kind of planting seeds. And at the same time, I've been reorienting my energy into strengthening the women who are already with it, who are already here with us, and focusing energy on that and building strength and building confidence and building awareness so that those women can go into their communities.
They're in a position now that the propaganda has been so intense that I find a lot of people online are making arguments for, we are a sexually dimorphic species, and this is the proof. Men really are stronger than women, don't belong in women's sports, and this is the proof. Making these kind of arguments are very, very defensive when we really should be on the offense. This is corporatism. This is corporate culture driving this. And here is the proof. My blog post will give you all of the proof that you need, that this is corporatism. This is how it rolls. This is how it was rolled out. This is what was earning money off of it. All the people in power in this movement are corporatists. They're not grassroots activists. There's no Harvey Milk here. These are corporate men behind this, corporatists driving this. All the banks, the major global banks, are way invested in this, cultivating this as normal. Body dissociation as normal. It's corporatism. So I think that is the offense, that's the offense. That's where you go with this. This is how you talk to people about this. And also people understand the language of money. Mm-hmm. Bring in the money. Get yourself, I have lots of elevator speeches, which are just a few lines of information. But they usually, for instance, I gave you one earlier. The LGB movement, that's a corporate banner. It used to be a market in 2015, generated $9.9 billion, that market, right? But now it generates $3.6 trillion 5 years later. So process that. Right. Take a minute. Right. Take two. But if you bring the money in, people pay attention because they understand that language. When you're talking about, women's rights versus trans rights, it turns into this whole, you wind up supporting the whole ideology of trans. There's no trans anything. 30 years ago, kids weren't screaming because they were in the wrong body. All of a sudden we have, the ability to stop their puberty and get them on a fast track to a lifeline of attachment to the medical industrial complex. And these kids are coming out of the woodwork. Get out of here. It's insanity. How can you not see that, this is driven corporately? But this is going on the offense, to tell people about the money behind this, and stop defending yourselves. We don't have to defend sexual dimorphism. You're kidding me. Everybody came from a mom,
I really appreciate what you're saying, and have also, been shifting towards this. A friend of mine, Alex, she's the gender mapper. She's the gender offender mapper. She's awesome, exposing Planned Parenthood and all this. And her line that I've been using is, if you're going to pretend to not know the difference between a man and a woman, then we can't have this conversation.
Exactly. You don't even have the conversation with them. Nope, not having this conversation with you. Nope. You don't know what basic biology is? Go back to school and we'll talk.
Well, they can't go back to school because the school's teaching nonsense now. It's crazy, like what's happening. That definitions of words are changing, definitions of terms are changing. I mean, it's that, that is very, very terrifying. But
and also, talking about the corporate structure behind this. Global banks, massive corporations, massive media, global media platforms, the largest international law firm in the world, they don't get behind, a minuscule part of the population's identity issues. You're kidding me. These entities are all driving this and supporting this. Corporations and banks and governments and stuff don't do this. Human rights organizations come up to fight those entities. I mean, the water protectors in Dakota who were trying to stop the oil pipeline on their land were vilified and taken apart by the state. They sent in attack dogs with the police to try to drive them off their own land. That's a grassroots movement. Hello. They didn't get any corporate support. They don't have any banner. They don't have any flag. They replaced the flags in the White House during Trans Remembrance Week, which seems to happen every week, but it was Trans Remembrance Week. I think it was last year. They replaced all the POW flags in the White House with the trans flag. And they had representatives of the state on the House floor reading I Am Jazz. Now, I Am Jazz is about a boy who's had his genitalia operated on 3 times now to make it look like a woman's vagina. He's had his penis removed. A mainstream media platform, People Magazine, everybody knows People Magazine, they covered his penis party, his penis goodbye party before he had the operation, celebrating with a cake his castration. Now, if this is not absolute madness, and if you can't see that this is absolute madness, I'm moving on to somebody that can, because you can't see the madness. I mean, that's just insanity. We've lost the thread here of our humanity in this. We really, really have. That's a horrible, horrible thing.
Yeah, I forgot about the cake. I forgot, I used to watch I Am Jazz on TLC before I had kind of come out of my indoctrination, but I'm really curious how women or men snap out of this kind of mind control, because I was in this. I was in it. I was indoctrinated through my birth doula training. It is, as you say, it is everywhere. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it. And it is, I get messages from women all the time that they have had to stop watching TV. They can't go anywhere. They can't talk to anyone without it coming up. It has permeated everything. And I was, I think, a really good target for this ideology to be a kind of foot soldier. I was like an empathetic young woman wanting to like do good in the world, and people are telling me that this is how you do good. This is how you be good. This is how you open your circles. And it's just, as you said, it's absolutely absurd and we really need to, yeah, I agree, focus energy on being on the offense and moving on to women and men who are in this fight with us.
And organizing, I mean, not just, you know, getting with them, but organizing against this. I mean, it's so, so important. I mean, I'm not even painting anymore just because there's just so much to do. I mean, I have people coming at me all the time. What do I do? What do I do? Organize, find somebody else and organize. Organize something. It doesn't matter what. People really, really get hung up on, well, anything that I do would be really small. So it's really insignificant. So I'm not going to do anything. They want to cure the whole thing or see that there is a cure before they participate. And this is not how it goes. You know, this is not how we fix things. This is not how we help things. You know, you have to do your part. I sent out a tweet fairly recently to people just thanking people who are at home who really don't have an option to organize outside in the world because maybe they're old, maybe they're disabled, maybe they just, you know, they have children, maybe, you know, there's many things that'll keep people plugged into their own life as opposed to being an activist. But they're tweeting my material around and it's like, look, we are so censored at every front. So these people are really, really important. They're getting the information around. You know, they're circulating this stuff. This is so, so vital. And I just thank them. And I'm telling you, the thing got like, you know, like so many people, like hundreds of people responded to that one. Oh my God, thank you for saying that. Thank you for saying, because I feel like I'm at home and I'm just tweeting these things, I'm making tweets, and it's so ridiculous. And it's like, no, this is really vital. Do something, do anything, you know? So I really try to encourage people, you know, and it's, you know, at this point in the culture, I kind of feel like we're just building airbags now because we're in a death spiral. You know, and I hate to say it like that, but you know what? We're all terminal anyway. It doesn't really matter. What matters is love and self-respect. And no self-respecting person or culture or government or country will allow this to go down on their watch. Little children being butchered and being drugged. No.
No, we won't have it anymore.
It's a matter of self-respect. Resist. Resist for your self-respect and for your love. Hold on to your humanity. That's what you're doing here. There's always going to be good and evil. You know, for as long as we survive, the human species, there'll always be good and evil. There'll always be that dance. Do you know what I mean? Which side? Well, how do you want to fill up your dance card? You know, people think that they can avoid this. This is coming down. You know, this is very fascistic, this whole apparatus. Stella Morabito, you know, wrote in 2016, and she's of the right, but I love her anyway. You know, I've adopted so many people on the right, it just blows my mind.
Me too, Jennifer.
I really have good comrades on the right. I mean, amazing people that are coming out and really, you know, speaking the truth. And she wrote in 2016, you know, how censorious and authoritarian this, you know, this agenda is, and she wasn't wrong.
Yeah, I've had a similar experience of starting to align, yeah, with people on the right, women on the right, and it's been a really, yeah, it's really shaken things up quite a bit, I know, for a lot of us.
And this is not a bad thing. This is really a good thing because people need to align. You need to reach across the aisle and you need to align yourselves. This is corporate power. We need more people. We need people working everywhere. And you just have to, you know, you have to be flex, you know, you have to be flexible.
Wow, Jennifer, you've covered so much and really spoken to the force behind what's happening. And I love, as a radical feminist, I love that you name names. I think that's so important. I really appreciate that you're pointing the finger at these men who have names, who are open about what they're doing. Again, as you said, this is not conspiracy. These individuals are very open about what they are doing and why they're doing it. And as you said, as soon as we're ready to open our eyes to see it, it is right there. Yeah, I like to say that female erasure really, it hides in plain sight.
You know, at the University of British Columbia, Victoria, British Columbia, in 2016, they had Martine Rothblatt as a speaker, right? Now, the trans chair organized this talk, this conference, and the trans chair is a position that was funded by Jennifer Pritzker. He made that position. That was the first ever of its kind, a trans chair position within a university in Victoria, British Columbia. And in 2016, Martine Rothblatt was there talking about the transition from transgenderism to transhumanism and how we get there and why it's good. And nobody in the audience gave it an ounce of critical thought. They were all, because he's brilliant, he's also very charismatic. He's very warm, sort of presenting, easy, you know? And he talked about how it's important for transhumanists, tech transhumanists, to adopt the strategy of tech transgenders, like building an organization like WPATH, World Professional Association of Transgender Health. They have a US branch of that. And I think they have a European branch of that also driving this ideology. But he said, you know, basically transhumanists have to take the same strategies as tech transgenders to make people comfortable with this. So this is really a gradual process. I think, you know, transgenderism is really, you know, it's an ad campaign more than anything else for more of the same. I mean, once they get you to adopt and accept and are comfortable with more body dissociation, more than we already, you know, have, you know, then they can roll out other things. Yeah, we need to stop this. We need to go on the offense and really stop this. And everybody needs to do something.
Well, thank you so much for pouring your time and energy into this. I know that it is for the short amount of time that I've been in it, I can understand that it is an all-consuming mission. Thank you, Jennifer. I'm so, yeah, just honored to have met you in person, in the flesh. Also just makes, yeah, it really makes all of this just feel, yeah, makes us feel more connected in a way that I think we really need to feel and be in solidarity in this, and that women know that there's community on the other side of this. You know, women who are afraid of being silenced, who don't fit in with their communities.
Or losing their friends. You know, you'll make friends. I mean, as artists, our job is to see, you know, is to take in the things that other people won't take in. I mean, if everybody in society was looking very deeply at issues and things that were happening around us, we wouldn't really need artists, you know. Everybody would be an artist. But an artist versus a craftsperson who might paint really nice pictures or make really nice pottery or what have you. An artist is really different in that we're taking in what other people will not. You know, so even though I'm not painting, I'm still doing that because that's what I do. That's my job as an artist. It's not to paint really beautiful pictures. It's to see. It's to see what other people won't look at and to transcribe that in some way, shape, or form to other people. You know, and when you're doing it visually, that's what makes a painting powerful. When you're really seeing something and you're conveying that visually to some other people, you know, even if it's abstract, you know, it's coming across because you're seeing, because it's in you and you're bringing it out. So even though I'm not, you know, not painting right now, I'm not really lonely for it, you know, because I'm doing it on another level. I mean, I'm taking in a lot of stuff because we talked about that earlier. I mean, I take in a lot of information and it's a lot of horror. It's kind of ghastly, but, you know, I'm very well trained at this age, you know, to process that well and to send it back out so that I'm not carrying that around with me and it's infecting my body and my mind and my life. You know, I think that people can get very damaged by taking in too much if they can't process it well. But, you know, artists, we learn that from early on, how to do that.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. What a beautiful note to leave off on as a fellow artist.
Pleasure.